Hello and welcome to my channel, and the subject of this video is the studio albums of Rush from 1974 to 1981 ranked. Rush conveniently grouped their albums into phases of their evolution by having 4 studio albums followed by a live album. Obviously I'm not including the live albums here, but the 8 albums I'll be talking about represent Rush's first 2 phases. My interest in the group waned a bit after that, although I do have Signals and Power Windows. Nevertheless, the period 1974 to 1981 is the one I see as their most consistent. I will preface the ranking by making the possibly contentious statement that Rush, to me, are a band with many fantastic tracks but few great albums, and the order I've put them in is influenced by how I view each album as a whole rather than on the number of outstanding tracks there might be on each one. Here we go then. In 8th is the self-titled debut album from 1974. Even though this is last in my ranking, there's a lot on here that I like. I suppose the problem it has is that in comparison with what was to come afterwards, it's a bit basic. There's a huge amount of Led Zeppelin influence, which in and of itself doesn't necessarily detract from the album. The standout track for me is Working Man, and I'm absolutely certain I'm one of many people who think that. There are several others that are much better than average. Finding My Way, What You're Doing, and Before and After immediately spring to mind. The only one that falls a little short is Here Again, which drags on somewhat. This was their only album to feature John Rutsey on drums, a very competent player, but it's fair to say that Neil Peart, his replacement, had a profound impact on the future direction of the band. In 7th, it's 2112 from 1976. To some, it might be surprising that I've placed this as low as 7th. The title track, taking up the whole of side 1, is unquestionably one of the band's high points. That's a double-edged sword though, because side 2 is dwarfed by it. Something for Nothing is excellent for sure, and the passage to Bangkok is okay. The rest though is unremarkable. On the plus side, the album rescued Rush's career, as there had been pressure on them to deliver an album which was more to the liking of the record company. Ironically, it's largely because of side 1 that the album became popular. Probably took the record company by surprise, because I dare say they weren't thinking of a sidelong track as being the route to the band's redemption. This was Rush's 4th album, which was followed by the live album All the World's a Stage, thus completing their first phase. In 6th, it's Permanent Waves from 1980. This album well and truly established Rush as a force in the UK, with Spirit of Radio getting to number 13 in the singles chart and the album reaching number 3. Permanent Waves, though, is a change in emphasis for Rush. The sci-fi and fantasy-centric aspects that dominated their previous 3 albums are replaced by something far more grounded. Complex arrangements still have their place on Jacob's Ladder and Natural Science. The album's second track, Free Will, is up-tempo, melodic, and became a live favourite. The first 2 tracks on side 2 are where things seem to become unfocused. I wouldn't describe them as bad tracks, just not an especially good fit on the album, with the end of different strings coming across as a bit of messy filler. In spite of that, over the years I've grown to like this album more than I did when it was first released. 5th is Fly By Night from 1975. Neil Peart's first album with Rush, and he made an immediate impact, not only as a musician but also as a lyricist. Opening track Anthem is as punchy a track as I can recall them recording during the 70s. The subject matter of the lyrics is inspired by author Ayn Rand's dystopian novel warning against the abandonment of individualism. Best I Can and the title track are decent, but a bit below the album's peak moments, and they feel like leftovers from their debut. The centrepiece is the superb By Tour and the Snow Dog, over 8.5 minutes long, with a lot of variety that keeps it interesting. The only real downside to the album is Rivendell on side 2. Following that, though, is the album's final track, In the End, a gentle start which turns into something more powerful at a similar tempo to Working Man from their debut album. And fourth, it's A Farewell to Kings from 1977. 3 outstanding tracks, 3 reasonable ones is how I see A Farewell to Kings. The outstanding ones, the title track, Xanadu, and Cygnus X1 Book 1, The Voyage. The title track gets the album off to a fine start and is followed by Xanadu, which I'd put as one of my favourite 5 tracks by Rush, very imaginatively put together. The same applies to Cygnus X1 Book 1 The Voyage, which is the final track on the album. In between those 3 are Closer to the Heart, another live favourite, Cinderella Man, and Madrigal, which is the band's most accomplished effort in showing a sensitive side, much more impressive than Tears off of 2112 or Different Strings from Permanent Waves. Cinderella Man I regard as the album's weak spot. Although it's based on a romantic comedy film that Geddy Lee liked called Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, the lyrics do take a bit of a moralising tone, which ties in a little to Neil Peart's views on objectivism. The idea that the wealthy work tirelessly and selflessly for the benefit of humanity is one I don't buy into, and the evidence of recent years seems to point to the exact opposite. Not that I have a problem with Rush or any other artist expressing an opinion. However, in doing so, to blindly assume that all listeners will agree would be naive. Third is Caress of Steel from 1975. Wonder how many Rush fans like this album as much as I do. What makes it work for me is that the quality is even throughout the album. Even though it contains fewer out-and-out Rush classics than most of their albums between 1974 and 1981, you don't get extreme peaks and troughs either. Bastille Day and Lakeside Park are the tracks which I dare say would be the most popular and well known, but the other tracks have merit also. I Think I'm Going Bald is Rush showing a rare moment of humour and is a solid, straightforward rocker. The remainder of the album is like an appreciation of multi-part prog rock tracks, and they're written and performed skillfully. The Necromancer is a postscript to Fly By Night's Bytor and the Snow Dog, where Bytor gets his salvation. The Fountain of Lamneth is about how undertaking a challenging task can lead to the entire experience being greater than the intended aim. Periodically, I like to embark on walks of 25 miles plus, so I can relate to how the individual parts of the song depicts the ups and downs involved in a demanding challenge. In my eyes and to my ears, a fine album. Second is Hemispheres from 1978. Speaking of balance, that's at the heart of Cygnus X1 Book 2 Hemispheres. Continuing from Book 1 on A Farewell to Kings, this track takes up the whole of the album's first side. Yes, we're back into moralising territory, but in this case, it's not so heavy-handed or romanticised. Maybe not as dramatic as side 1 of 2112 or as down-to-earth as The Fountain of Lamneth. It has qualities all of its own, and it's another high point for the band. The material on side 2 is pretty close to the same level, giving the album a satisfying balance. Circumstances kicks it off, and although ordinary, it is effective. The 9.5-minute instrumental closing track, La Villa Strangiato, is yet another Rush classic. Sandwiched between those 2 tracks is The Trees, musically superb, but Neil Peart's lyrics can't escape heavy-handedness this time. Again, he's drawing on the writings of Ayn Rand and expressing what comes across as a propagandist's oversimplification. To help qualify my take on Ayn Rand, I will say that I've read her novel The Fountainhead, and the main takeaway I got from it is that she was quite possibly a sadomasochist. Perhaps I should read more. First is Moving Pictures from 1981. Hardly a radical choice to have as my favourite Rush album. All the tracks fit together perfectly, there are no duff or dull moments, no loss of focus anywhere, and every track has something memorable. Without doubt, Rush are a guitar band, but this album is one where synths are almost fully integrated, providing significant melodic structures. They're not just used for the odd flourish here or there or merely as supporting mood textures. It's like the more restrained prior use of synths had been part of a learning curve leading to the way they're used on this album. Being a fan of electronic music, I've heard more than a few rock albums where the use of synth has been clumsy or awkward sounding. Moving Pictures doesn't suffer from those flaws. The Camera Eye, YYZ, Witch Hunt, and Tom Sawyer demonstrate this well. For the traditionalists who like guitar as the main focal point, then Limelight and Red Barchetta tick that box. On Red Barchetta in particular, its arrangement and execution make it one of my favourites by Rush. The lyrics to Limelight sees the band reflecting on how success has affected them as people, even if it does skate a little close to being patronising. Final track, Vital Signs, hints at the direction Rush would take on their next studio album, Signals. Between Moving Pictures and Signals, the live album Exit Stage Left would round off the band's second phase. Even though I've not included the live albums from this period in the ranking, for the record, I think All the World's a Stage is excellent, but I find Exit Stage Left rather tepid. To summarise the studio albums, I'd say that between 1974 and 1981, Rush were a band that started out showing promise and ended up exceeding it. Unlike many rock bands of the era, they didn't take the soft option of developing a winning formula and resolutely sticking to it. One of the few bands in the genre who could genuinely claim to have been progressive. As is well known, Neil Peart retired from the band in 2018 and subsequently died in 2020. At the time, Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson decided to call it a day as Rush, so the wisdom of the recent decision to recruit a new drummer and revive the band remains to be seen. It has to be said that even if the new material is highly thought of in the first instance, there is the risk that Rush will become just another ageing nostalgia machine, like many others whose best days are far behind them. Sometimes it's better to draw a line under the past and simply appreciate it for what it was. They could prove me wrong, and part of me hopes that they do. In the video description, I've linked a playlist containing a track from each of the albums. And, as ever, if you've made it this far, thanks for watching.